Good afternoon, everyone, and we want to welcome you to our webinar today. We're excited to have Warwick Leach from Columo with us, and Warwick will be presenting on pinpoint forecasting with Columo AI. And before I pass it over to Warwick to cover on this topic, I would like to remind you that we are recording this session, and it will be available in our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box, and we will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. And now I'm going to pass it on over to Warwick to kick off our presentation.
Thanks, Angie. Really appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for coming, and those who are watching later. I hope you enjoy. As Angie said, my name's Warwick Leach from Columo. And I'm going to jump straight in to our agenda. So today is all about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and forecasting. I'm going to take you through a little bit of information, some learning about machine learning and artificial intelligence, and then some practical examples. So I've got some case studies. I've actually got a worked example as well within the Columo software, so you can see how it looks. So first of all, I've got to share what machine learning is and artificial intelligence and why it's important. Where does it get used, particularly within the office of the CFO? We're not seeing a lot of that right now, but it is growing. More and more organisations are using it, and we've got some great case studies around that. And I'll give you some other ideas of how it can and is used within finance and accounting departments. Now, when I use the term finance and accounting, I'm not talking about CPA companies. I'm talking about any organisation, whether it's not for profit or for profit, privately held or publicly held, companies that have accounting, FP&A and finance teams. Doesn't mean CPAs can't use it. We certainly have some accounting and law firms, for instance, that use Columo, and I've got a law firm example of some artificial intelligence that we use for forecasting. So what is machine learning? Well, machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence is essentially having a computer that can think for itself. Typically, these days, computers thinking when they think for themselves have a very narrow facet or narrow lens that they focus on when they're thinking for themselves. So they're not thinking about real world problems like we do right now, and that apparently is a long way off. So that's artificial intelligence. Machine learning is an application or a subset of artificial intelligence. And the cool thing about machine learning, it's also known as ML, is it'll actually build the math, the algorithmic models it needs based on the sample data that we give it, and it'll create predictions for us. And we tell which predictions are good and which are bad, and it'll then go ahead and use and continue to learn based on the data that we provide it and the guidance we give it. Now this, I put on the end there, this is big. And this is big because it's made machine learning accessible for mere mortals like me, Angie, and the rest of us on the call here. Previously, you really did need to engage data scientists. So let's get into it. So with machine learning, the really cool thing is you can use it regularly. You can update a forecast every day. With COVID-19 upon us right now, this is super important. You know, I talk to companies who just want to know what their profitability has been, and they want to look at that quickly, and they want to use that to forecast what profitability is going to be. Do we have cash in the bank? And it's difficult to get people to continue to contribute to a forecast every day. You know, that you can't have the whole organisation doing that. Maybe once a week or twice a week even you can. So in the meantime, you can use intelligence to help you with those forecasts. It'll also give you information, mathematically backed information, to spark conversations and help your decision-making process. It'll help you save time, and it'll also make your forecasts and your budget far more accurate over time. So I've got a little note there right at the end. So are you going to lose your job to AI? Well, maybe. That really depends on you, your organisation, and if you're looking to learn. Now, if you're looking to learn a little bit, and it's not a whole lot, it's certainly not posting journals, it's certainly not chasing accounts receivable or sending out invoices. It's a little bit deeper. It's if you've got Excel skills, and maybe you've got someone on the team, or maybe yourself, you've tinkered with maybe some macros, just a little bit, even just recording, or you've used regression analysis within Excel that's been there for a long, long time, or you're into pivot tables, then you've probably got a bit of a technical nous and you don't need a whole lot. And this is the cool thing with the new technology that's available to us. You don't need a lot of technical skills other than knowing your business and knowing your data to use ML. Now, ML being machine learning. Now, it's going to look great on your resume too. Perhaps you end up becoming a data scientist. They're a little different today, data scientists, to what they used to be, because you don't necessarily need to be as knowledgeable of all the algorithms available to you. It's more of a business knowledge, which is pretty cool. So AI has been around for a long time, since the 60s. You may have seen a video. If not, you can jump on Google or YouTube and look for it. There's a video of one of the very first artificial intelligence programs in computers that could determine whether pictures, literally photographs of human beings, were male or female. I think it got a little bit confused with the Beatles, apparently, but the technology's been around for a long, long time, and there's been some hurdles to make it available and applicable to business life. It actually gets used in everyday life. Most fridges and freezers in your kitchen have artificial intelligence built in these days, and that's as simple as the fridge times itself to run in an aggressive cooling mode, breakfast, maybe lunch these days while we're all at lockdown, maybe all day, depending if you've got how many people in the household. I've got 3 kids and my wife, and we seem to be attacking the fridge often. But then at nights when we're sleeping, it can go into an economy mode. So it's been around for some time. There's lots of other applications as well, and I'll show you some more of those. But within the business, and think the office of the CFO or the CEO is a full organisation. This is a Gartner survey, and I actually updated this recently because I was kind of curious to know what 2019 looked like as far as AI adoption. So in 2018, we're expecting about 23% of organisations were going to deploy AI. 14% already had AI deployed, but only an extra 5% ended up deploying AI. So it was pretty interesting. It didn't roll out as much as we thought. And there's a few reasons for that. The hurdles I mentioned earlier, the reasons are it has been tough, and this is going away. It has been tough to get skilled staff, data scientists. I mentioned before, data scientists aren't as important anymore, and we'll talk about that in a moment. I actually think, this isn't personal, you know, the hurdles from Gartner are literally gathered from organisations. The next one is understanding the benefits and the business uses. I get more questions about how can I use AI? Where can I use AI? Can I just flick a switch and will the magic happen? They're the sorts of things that I find the trickiest hurdles for people to get over. Skilling up staff is kind of interesting. There was a Gartner presentation, I think it was in October 2019, and they were saying that they're encouraging organisations not to go and hire new staff for an AI project, but to use people, perhaps FP&A people, perhaps finance people, perhaps business people who, again, have an Excel or a data nous, train them up. And it's a short training. It's not weeks and weeks or months. It's not a degree. It's not a doctorate. It's literally videos online these days. Train them up on how to use machine learning to help with your forecasting. And the reason they say that is the business knowledge the ability to ask the questions of the machine and the data, and then to be able to analyze and reconcile the data that comes out the other end, is far more important and far more essential now than understanding all the algorithms you could use for your traditional artificial intelligence projects. So I found that pretty interesting. The other big thing is data, and that's where Columo comes in. On all three, we can help train staff. Obviously, you're going to learn some benefits today using artificial intelligence and in particular machine learning, but also getting your data right and cleaning it. That's a big factor. It's interesting, you don't need a ton of data. We'll talk about that shortly. But on the right-hand side, you've got maturity, skills of staff that we already talked about, understanding the benefits and uses. These are the actual stats that came through. Security and privacy concerns. This was interesting, and I don't have all the detail behind it, but I expect that's because most of the, not all, but much of the machine learning capability is cloud-based, and there's still a little bit of fear and uncertainty over that, although that's washing away these days. Measuring the value is pretty important too. Did it make sense to actually run this project? And there's obviously some other areas here, finding a starting point, getting a business case up as well. So some interesting stats. So the big question is, where can you use AI? Where can I use it? How do I make it go today? What can I do with it? Will it help me? Well, here's some examples. And I'm going to start with some grandiose examples and then bring it down into something more simple. But this will give you a sense of the capability that you've got today. So machine learning, AI and ML, machine learning is being fast-tracked. Any technology with machine learning in it's being fast-tracked by the FDA because medical devices in particular, obviously, a computer to house the machine learning. So if you're a diabetic, for instance, and you have a pump, an insulin pump, it has machine learning built in that will track the glucose levels within the person it's essentially attached to, and will administer insulin based on the uptake of the insulin, therefore how much sugar is removed from the bloodstream. And it's got to figure out, the time of day, is the person asleep or not? When did they last eat? So the person has to interact with the pump, but all of that's built into to a tiny little device that sits on people's belts, or some of them attached to their phone, or just attached to their arm. And the reason the FDA is fast tracking this stuff is because it's just been working and it works well, and we trust it. You would have seen the ad as this kind of a spectacular ad by Microsoft, seeing the snow leopards on the mountainside. It's great. It's really cool. How do I, what's the business application for that? There isn't really one unless you're a snow leopard counting company, and there's not a lot of those around, I don't think. This is actually a video. I won't bother playing it. Actually, maybe I can. We'll skip to the part. It's on YouTube. It's a Tesla 3 model. Again, you can download this. I'm just going to pop over here. I had the luxury of getting an Uber not long ago. Here we go. That's it right there. Let's watch this. So this vehicle is on cruise control, literally, that we're sitting in, and the car on the left came across in front of the Tesla Model 3 vehicle, and the Tesla Model 3 slowed down and moved across. Again, another awesome example of artificial intelligence and machine learning. The way I understand Tesla's work is they see traffic conditions ahead of them, and based on previous experiences of other vehicles on the highway, they're able to see when an accident's about to happen several cars ahead, or potentially about to happen, and make evasive maneuvers beforehand. So that's pretty awesome stuff. Not forgetting the fact that they've got sensors all around the car. They can see the other vehicles around, adjust the speed accordingly, make lane changes, starting to make lane changes where they need to. And they even, I think now with the latest update, have red light and stop sign sensor capability. So there's some awesome stuff in there. And again, that machine continues to learn. Some other things which might be useful in business, I don't know, depends on your business. Perhaps if you're in retail, you're able to use, and this is available today. I know there's some funky numbers over here, but facial recognition's been available for a long time. And the interesting thing with all of this technology is it's actually cheap. It's commoditized, so it costs next to nothing. So with this, in this example, there's a picture of a young person here. We're able to determine things like their gender, their age, even literally facially recognize people in some countries. They have this technology running today. In most countries though, like the US, we typically don't permit that, but we can determine whether this person's angry, sad, disgusted, surprised, and apply some statistics against that. So some pretty interesting stuff. And those statistics come out. But it's not always right, and we need to help it along. And in this example, I went shopping for a baseball bat on Amazon, and Amazon decided I needed some knuckle dusters and a balaclava and things like that. They thought perhaps I was up to no good, or based on the fact that people who buy this particular baseball bat, these are other things that they tend to look at as well, which isn't really useful for me. So the purpose of this picture is just to share that it's not always right. It is a machine and it is learning. It still needs humans to help it along. So let's get beyond the hype and the press, beyond the computer talking to the people, the engineers in the airline hangar, telling it where the engine might break down soon. I don't know if you've seen that. I think it's an IBM ad. Let's get real. So AI projects aren't just for massive enterprises. They're for every organization. You need data, and you probably be surprised to know that you already have the data. Now, interestingly, general ledger data isn't fantastic data for machine learning and for forecasting, because we post journals at the end of the month to change the data up. It's not literally cash moving necessarily. We've got accruals, things like that to deal with. So sometimes that doesn't make sense, but there are components of the general ledger, in fact, the sub-ledgers like AR and AP and operational data that we can use. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't use artificial intelligence against our expenses and our revenues directly in the general ledger, but we typically wouldn't. The example I've got at the end here, we have. Normally what you would do is you would decide what your primary driver of your organization is, and where's your revenue coming from, and how does that happen? Is it people billing customers for service? Is it selling widgets to customers or businesses or cars, or what is the primary driver of creating revenue? And then have human created calculations to figure out your costs from there, because that is actually easy to figure out your costs from a forecast, whether it's artificial intelligence or otherwise, to then go and drive the bottom line. And I've mentioned already, you may already have the talent in your organisation. FP&A people slide into this category quite nice, where they're already spending quite a bit of time in Excel and creating some really interesting spreadsheets, big, small, or whatever. So they're working with functions. Some people have dropped into macros. And they're already pretty technical, and they have the business nous. They would be the people I would tag as a potential AI specialist. And that's not their whole job, by the way, either. It's part-time. You set and nearly forget. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. So where can we use AI in business? The classic is sales and marketing. Sales in retail is a great example, where you're trying to figure out what the trends of selling a particular line might be: ladies' pants, motorcycle, tires, coffee cups, whatever it is. And marketing's really interesting at the moment. I was talking to someone the other day where they use machine learning for marketing. And think cold calling and those spam emails that you get. We all call it spam if it's from us. It's clearly not spam, it's important information. But when you're trying to generate business via an email campaign, machine learning now gets used to determine the best time, how much content, sometimes the content, and how much content, to send to which sort of people. So within machine learning and artificial intelligence, you have this thing called features, and I'll talk about that in a moment and with our case studies. So if you think of a feature as a primer that might change the forecast data that the machine needs to know about to give us our future predictions. So one of the future predictions might be, how do I, when is the best time, and what is the best number of words, and what is the best day to send an email to a CFO to get a response? And based on historical trends, historical data, emails that were successful, that got opened, that didn't get opened, that got rejected or got a nice response, that data is fed into the machine learning and will create essentially a template and timing for when to send those emails out to those people. It's going to be different for CIOs, it's going to be different for FP&A staff, for controllers, so on and so forth. So it's in use today, and you may already be on the receiving end of those emails. And there's some other examples there. Supply chain's pretty important, particularly around logistics. Making sure that you know, the fastest possible routes being used right now, and truck driver's going to buy the best price gas, for instance, based on the route that they're on. As well as other things. Banking, you've seen banking, some level of artificial intelligence, probably when you've had a fraudulent charge on your credit card. But yet, you can still travel to the UK like I did last year, and started charging my credit card, and it, you know, the bank knew it was not fraudulent. So artificial intelligence is able to pick that up pretty quickly. It's very, very clever. And we talked about healthcare as well a little bit there. But opportunities in your business, we recommend to, especially now, but generally, and I think organisations will probably move to this process. If they aren't already there, they're going to stick to continually forecasting. So I'll just get all the things out on this. So seeding a new budget, continuous forecasting, and demand planning. They're some of the major things. So continuous forecasting is probably the big one right now, where we want to continue to forecast, continue to use historical data to help us predict what's going to happen in the future. It is really tricky right now because we're in times that we haven't been in before, no doubt. But we've been in this time for you know, 6 or 7 weeks. So we've now got enough data for many organisations to use artificial intelligence to help predict the future. At some point and in some way. So it can certainly be a very, very helpful tool in predictions. Now, an important note here, add another voice to the conversation. This isn't gospel that the machine predicts, although it gets fairly close. I'll show you soon. It's another voice in the room. It's data that has no agenda. It's got no axe to grind. It's not going to get paid more if it's right or wrong. It's not trying to displace other people within the organisation. It's not political. It's apolitical. So it gives everyone comfort that you know, this is a guide that might be true. It might not be as well, but you know, better than sometimes better than what humans can predict. And let's check it out. So how do we get to the point where we can create and use artificial intelligence? We strongly recommend reporting. Get your reporting in a system, a centralized system, where the data is easily accessible and easily manipulable. That's not a word, manipulated. Now you'll see across the top of this screen, we've got predict, shape, and achieve. So we want to be able to use AI to predict and shape our organisation so we can achieve our results. Help guide people through this current absolute down many organisations or down come others, and up for many more, as certainly here in Texas, as restaurants and hairdressers and organisations start to open their doors. So reporting is key, and we strongly suggest having a data warehouse, data mart, like we have with Columo, because you've got to clean your data. You've got to get your data into a point that is useful and legible and can be used for forward predictions. Now, if you can't report it, it can't be used effectively for any machine learning or AI project. Now, out of that reporting, you should also have your self-service analytics and ad hoc discovery. What is that? Well, it's slicing and dicing your data. It might be creating pretty charts and things like that, but you've got to be able to discover yourself. It's not static reports. It's not just drill through to transactions either. It's being able to slice and dice and manipulate data and shape it in a way that you can analyze that artificial intelligence data that comes through, that forecast that comes through. Once you've got those things in place, and this is even before we've got AI, mind you, you've got to have these things in place. Your budgeting planning requires modeling. Now, I mentioned earlier where artificial intelligence will give you a forecast of data. The next step is, and revenue in particular, or sales, or number of people through the door. It's that, imagine that's a line item or an account or a line of data for maybe all of your different stores or departments. Or operating units, that then drives everything else. That drives your costs and inevitably your profitability. So that modeling needs to be in place. Otherwise, AI is going to sit out there. It's going to say, yep, there are your sales. What do I do with this? Let's put it in Excel. Well, that's pain and agony, absolute pain and agony. Forecasting, continuous forecasting. Now, all of this is built in with Columo. That's an important point to make. So you do get a single application for all of this. Then you're ready for your machine learning. And the machine learning is actually the easy bit. Getting through the other stuff, that's it's important. It's very, very important. Otherwise, machine learning is not worthwhile. So let's check out a couple of real-world examples. I've got a professional services. It's a law firm, and a food and beverage. Food and beverage was interesting because it's a highly volatile industry. So let's check out the first one, a law firm. So what this law firm wanted to do is they wanted to be able to predict billing, or what they call productivity through the month. They wanted to do it early on in the month. And generally people didn't like entering their timesheets through the month. If anyone here is listening as a service industry, where, you know, your lawyers or accountants or engineers, you got a lot of timesheets. Those timesheets sometimes only get updated at the end of the month, and then they've got a few issues because they forgot what they did at the beginning of the month. So what we used this predictive model for was to predict what revenue was going to look like by the end of the month, and when people were actually going to enter their timesheets as well, which is kind of interesting. So we could say at the beginning of the month, based on historical info, we're going to have probably revenue is going to be at X, and we're going to see the trend, the data come in through the month, and it's going to look like this. So let's take it out and have a bit of a look. Now, I mentioned the features. These are your different drivers here. So we had office, because this organisation had many different offices around the country. The different day of the week, obviously weekdays, people are going to be working. Weekends tend not to. Distance from the end of the month, and that was -15 to +16 across the month. And whether offices were closed, we used office closures instead of holidays. Various states have different closures. Christmas, obviously, everyone's closed. But we use office closures, and that's just made it a lot easier. So this was the initial result. And now, by the way, how the heck do you make something like this? Well, this is a chart of data, and there's two lines. There's actuals and the prediction, what came out of the model, the machine learning. And you'll notice here, this is day, month, year, calendar, not month, day, year. It's kind of the other way around. So day, month, year. And I think that's right. Yeah, January. Yeah, that's correct. Yep. So so what we did here was yeah. So what we did here was we took 80% of our historical data, we loaded that into the machine learning tool, which was actually a Microsoft tool, and I'll show you how to get to that. And we plugged the numbers in, ran the process, and out came a result. We used the remaining 20%. So imagine we took data from here back and loaded that in the machine, and then we matched the prediction forwards with what actually happened. So we take data, say, to December, if I was to do it today, and we leave January, February, March out of the machine so we could match it. And we could tweak those features accordingly. And it was pretty close. Based on what we've got here of people entering data. The next slide, though, is really interesting. So this is the month to date view, which is a more useful view of data, and it gets incredibly correct. There's a few little hiccups here and there where it's not quite perfect, and that's going to happen because it isn't perfect. But otherwise, the line was really, really similar to what happened to actual. It's barely showing the actual. Now you get instances here where people slacked off, or maybe there was an event or a feature that we didn't know about. And then over here, same sort of thing. The managing director, I think, of this organisation sent an email out and said, "Do your timesheets or else." So people were a little bit better at doing it. So it was pretty interesting results, and they continue to use that today, and they continue to use historical data to feed the machine learning and match it and tweak it just gently to continue to improve that forecast. So the next example is a food and beverage company. They wanted to know what the spend was. So revenue. So they could try and figure out what the rostering should be, you know, inventory, whether it's food or alcohol, things like that. So we created a model for them. We worked with them to create this model to predict daily spend for any venue or each of their venues. I can't remember how many venues they had, but this is an example of one of the venues for up to 6 months. Day of week, month of year, venue, and events, sporting events, for instance. And this was the initial load. So again, we took 80% of the data and we used, I think it was 7 years of data in this case. We had an 89% correlation coefficient. And all that means is we're kind of close, but not really close enough. Now you'll notice that actuals were quite higher than the prediction. And that's because over the last 7 years, revenue has increased by about 25%. So we had to adjust that. And that's this arrow popping up here telling us all about that. So we adjusted the data going in, and it's okay to adjust your historical data by 25% because you've got to tweak something to get the data right. We're not looking for, you don't lose points for that, I guess is the best way to put it. We're looking to help the machine create, or the computer create a forecast that's going to make sense for us. And it's really interesting. As we made that adjustment to historical data, we lifted it by 25%. We started to get the results that we expect. Obviously, there's some anomalies here. But it was able to pick things like April. So this is Easter. People went out and ate more in Easter, and the machine predicted it, which is really interesting. So historically, even though Easter doesn't fall on a particular date, that's why we use events, we're still able to predict things. But now and then you get a big, pretty black swan. And this is a problem with AI. It's never going to be perfect. Because what happens is we had a couple of events over here that we hadn't accounted for. Now this one's my my favorite over here. So I think this was it. Yeah, no, yeah, this one was my favorite. So we had, you notice, actual spike in here. So once we adjusted for, this was a holiday that we forgot to add in, another event. This event here we couldn't cater for. Now this data is for a restaurant. It happens to be in Australia, in New South Wales. And in Australia, there's this big rugby game between the North and the South, New South Wales versus Queensland. New South Wales happened to win. It was the first time they'd ever won in 10 years. No artificial intelligence or human intelligence could have predicted that, they might have hoped, I expect, but could have predicted that New South Wales would have won what we call the State of Origin. It's a 3-game series, and New South Wales won. So there was more activity, more spend through that period right there when they won. Close, but it's never going to be perfect, and that's why it's just another voice in the room. I'll skip over this. So what I want to do is jump into who should use it. Some really important points. It's pretty inexpensive. You can try machine learning for free today. So give it a go, and I'll show you a link in a second. All right, I'm just going to slide over here. So some examples where machine learning gets used by companies trying to figure out cash flow, accounts receivable. I'll talk about this before I tell you the next story, which is pretty interesting. So you can figure out using machine learning what your receivables are going to look like, whether it's by client, by size of bill, age of WIP, and any other of those features or drivers. I've heard that there's now machine learning and there's services that use machine learning to determine whether a possible client or customer is going to be a good payer or a bad payer, and it doesn't use the credit score, which is pretty interesting. Staff turnover, is this person likely to change jobs? If we do or don't make changes like pay rises, depending on their job function, things like that, are they likely to stay or leave? Project health is an interesting one too, particularly in construction. Well, any project really, but I know in construction it's easy for project managers to forecast that everything's fine and dandy, but the numbers can tell a different story. You know, the actual movement of data within a project tells a real story, and when you match artificial intelligence and lay that over the top, it brings out the reality of whether a project's going well or not. And if a project manager is or often will right at the last minute say everything's a disaster rather than bringing it up earlier. So it's pretty important. Now you can start for free. Where do I start? There's a link for you. I'll leave that there for a moment. And this is a picture of Start for Free. This is a Microsoft Azure free machine learning. And you'll probably get a copy or a video of this later, or we'll make sure you get this link, or Google machine learning with Microsoft. I'll leave that there for a moment. Bing, I should have said Bing, machine learning. And you can start it out for free. I think you get it for a month. I think you do have to, from memory, drop a credit card in there. For those of you that don't have kids, Xbox like I've got, I already had my credit card details in there, but they will tell you if they're going to start charging you once the trial's over, and you can elect not to or not. That's how it was a little while ago. Once you're in, you continue to your Azure portal. You give it a go. Start your free trial and start entering your data. It's pretty straightforward. Pick machine learning. I think now, I was looking there the other day, now the machine learning pages actually have videos, tutorials on how to make this go. So machine learning and AI, and you've got to create a learning service workspace. Follow the video. It's going to take you through this. You give it a name. And off you go. You can start inputting data. It's as easy as uploading flat files and things like that. But how does it work in an automated fashion? Pretty simple. So I've kind of overlaid Columo and machine learning and stuff here. On the left, you've got your data sources. I mentioned earlier you've got to massage and clean your data and get it into a state that can be used by humans. You'll notice this. There's reports and dashboards and analysis that can be used by humans. We use cubes because they're super fast and super easy to use. But when you want to overlay a forecast from the machine, you literally pump, I'll use the word pump, but we share data into the machine that we want to use for our forecast. Let's say it's sales forecast, revenue maybe, or cash. And the result we feed back into Columo, back into the Columo database, which is all Microsoft SQL Server technology, and it's available on the report. So we try and keep it pretty straightforward like that. Now this can be a manual process, or we can automate this process. If you're in Columo Cloud, it's super easy. On-prem, a couple of extra steps, but it's still absolutely achievable. And then you can use that data any way you like, whether it's on a P&L, a nice dashboard, or some slice and dice analytics. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at this. I'm just going to go and find my my example page here. So this is Columo, and this is a sample portal. I'm on my cloud version of Columo, and I'm going to show you the result of running some AI. And we actually ran some AI across our general ledger, like I said not to do earlier. That's okay. Let's go and check out a report here. This is just my menu across the side. We've got multi-currencies. So this example automatically consolidates data from a number of different sources. It could be NAV, D365, and you know, any other source, and subsystems as well. So I'm just going to load my profit and loss. Now it's really important to, like I said, to get your data in a shape that's useful. And I'll just step you through this gently. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I think everyone's seen an income statement before. We've got our sales down the side where you can you can drill into more detail if you want and drill down to transactions and things like that. These are all Columo features, and this isn't necessarily a Columo demo, but it's important to show that I've got a lot of data underneath this automatic consolidation view of the world here. So it's going to go and show me that data now. The other thing I've got here is, we're going across the page as it loads this. We've got cost centers. This happens to have currency. It's got date here as well. I've got actual budget, and we're looking at current year versus year to date and commentary too. I'm just going to refresh this page. I think Zoom sometimes interrupts me a little bit there. Let's just pop back over here. I can get back in pretty quickly, obviously, and pop open that report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to, there's an AI version, and it's going to update with some data that was created by machine learning. So how did I do that? That's magic already. It's just turned up there. I'll show you. I'm going to go to admin. Now these are concepts and ideas, right? This is a demonstration. Let's go to manage scenarios. This is step one. This is where I've got to create a new scenario. So let's say I want to create a whole bunch of different AI examples. I just created one, and what I did was I hit add, and there's an add up there. I'm not going to save it for this, but I call it AI V1, AI version. It's in review at the moment. I can use it. I could have it opened or closed, and all that means is that we're using it, and we might actually use it to and tweak the numbers that it comes out with, whether it's public or private, just for me or just for a closed group or everyone, and some other information. So once we've done that, we hit save. I'm going to hit cancel. We hit save and we hit process, and that'll create this AI version. Now, the next step, everyone will do a little differently. This is super simplified, so don't go expecting that we turn it on and it just magically happens. We do have to configure to connect to your source systems. We do have to configure the AI process as well. But again, we show you how all that hangs together. But ideally, you end up with a really simple page where once you've created that new scenario, I've got it here, we can choose to process for that. Now, in reality, I'm going to have different selections. Well, what's your baseline data? Is your baseline data your actuals? Yeah, it's going to be actuals. Okay, so we want to create or update the data in AI version 1 or 2 or 3, or AI May 2020. You can have as many versions as you like, and we're going to base it on historical actuals and hit go. And that'll go and collect the data, pump the data into our machine learning model. And when the data comes back, we will want to check that. So how do we check that? Pretty straightforward. Go to our report. I'll go to my P&L over here, just a menu system on the left, and I can have a look at the data. So let's do some more interrogation in this data because it's given me a whole P&L. Like I said, we wouldn't normally do it, but let's check it out anyways. And I'm going to slice and dice and do some analysis because what I really want to do is see what the trend is. Yes, I would normally have a report that has trends on it, but I don't get to show you this if I open that. So let's have a look. So this is, I'm looking at my AI version 1. So this is Columo's slice and dice tool. So once we've got the machine, now how long does it take? Actually, I should point out, how long does it take to create my that's going to depend on how much data you've got and how detailed that data is as well. Normally it's pretty quick, but how much history you've got, how many stores, if you're doing it by product or product line, how many products you're pumping through there as well. So it really depends, but you're not talking days or anything, or even hours. And you can run multiple iterations, not that you typically want to, because once that model, that machine learning model gets bedded down, you're going to be tweaking it here and there a little bit, but you're going to be using it throughout time. And you want it in an interface like this where, if your FP&A person was the person who helped them create that model, they can take vacation anytime they want. So let's do a comparison here between our budget and our AI version. I'm just holding down Control in Columo with our little member explorer, and I hit OK, and it's going to give me data. I do want to trend this sales data in particular. So I want to see it across time. So let's go and grab fiscal periods and just drag that down. I'm going to load up fiscal periods list, because right here, you know, I can drill down into days. I think it'll go into days are irrelevant. You can see it replicates through there because I'm not storing my general ledger by day in this example, although a lot of customers do. So I'm going to click on fiscal period and hit this second button, which means just show all periods, and click OK. And then I'm going to drill on that. Now, my AI, I've only asked it to forecast forwards for this particular fiscal year. So let's just focus on that. And let's drill down. So we've got our actuals coming through and they stop there, which is what we expect. And we might actually put forecast numbers in there, but I'm not going to right now. We've got budget data. This is what we predicted at the beginning of the year. And this is the AI version of data that we used. And we actually took a snapshot from before the actuals. And we're using this perhaps as our 20% test to validate that the data is right. And it's not too bad, but it's kind of hard to tell with the numbers. So let's go ahead and create a chart. And I really want to get, this chart's not very good. Let's go to a line chart. Again, this is all baked into Columo. You've got this, this capability available today. Now you notice we've got a big lump over here. And I'm just going to hit minus there to get rid of the year so it's better spread out. And let's have a look at what the machine says. So we've got our actuals ticking along. Down here, the blue is the machine, which is way close. Yeah, it's a little different over here to actuals, a little different here and there. And then this is what it predicts moving forwards, which is similar to what our budget is, but our budget's way out. Now, the budget was created by humans, and the machine learning, which is the blue, this one here, turn it on and off, was created by the machine based on historical actuals. So that gives you a sense of how accurate the machine learning capabilities are today, and hopefully it gives you a bit of a sense of some application that you can use it for, and you know, some steps to dabble and try it out as well. Now, the next thing people want to do is send this to Excel, and this is all Columo stuff. This is pretty cool stuff. When we send this to Excel, it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to get this view here, not the chart, move to Excel because that's pretty tricky. And we'll just load that up. And what we'll get is a nice report in Excel. And there we go. Now let's have a look at this compared to what we had earlier. Pretty much the same. The difference with Columo though is, and this is a Columo feature, we've got these Columo functions in here, and these functions let us do this. They let us get data from our database, from that cube that I mentioned earlier. Now, as we update, if we do run more models on this AI stuff, then we're going to get more updated here. And we want that. We want that because we've got to have the data coming through our spreadsheets and our web pages often. Now, what do we do with this once we've got it like this? Well, I can create a chart. You can do that in Excel. You know how to do that. I'm going to keep it super simple. I'm going to turn this into a web page that I can then use as my report. So this is the report I didn't create earlier because I wanted to show you how to do this slice and dice stuff. So all I do in Columo is pick my Columo ribbon in Excel and hit publish, and it converts it automatically into a web page that I can interact with, and it'll pop it up here. And then I can go and drill down and look for more information and see that prediction come through for those different entities and cost centers and things like that. So that's a quick worked example without getting into a heck of a lot of detail. I wanted to do that pretty quickly, just to give you a sense of how it hangs together. I wanted to make sure you all understood how you can use AI and try and get you out of the hype, because the hype makes it scary. And makes it unattainable, but it is attainable today. And again, if you can get your data in a sensible place and you've got your reporting coming out, you've got some models and budgets and forecasts and calculations wrapped around your revenue, you know, the primary drivers of your organisation, headcount, obviously another one, then you can get that real-time reporting and analytical self-service capability too. So, so just a final thought before we throw it over to Q&A. So machine learning does require data. The cleaner it is, the better, but it doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, that's a mistake if you're going for perfection. As long as it's consistent and you feed it regularly, we can help you out today. And if you've got some ideas on how you might like to implement some AI and machine learning within your organisation, let us know. Reach out to the team at Inovia, reach out to me. These projects are not big projects, by the way. They're small projects. You know, we're talking a week, maybe two, maybe a couple of days, depending on the amount of data and the sort of thing you want to do. Step one is to figure out if it makes sense to use artificial intelligence for your forecasting and your planning. It will save you time, it will save you money, it will save you headcount as well, so people can go and do more productive things and not stress in spreadsheets anymore. So Angie, I'm going to throw it over to you for some Q&A.
All right, thank you, Warwick. We do have some questions that came through. The first one is, how much of the Columo solution is customized and how much is a standard out-of-the-box solution?
How much of it's customized out of the box? So there's always going to be some customization. I don't know what the measure, you know, how we could measure how much is customized. We use the word configure instead of customize. So we have, so Columo has obviously the web and the Excel. It also has Word and PowerPoint add-in, and that's the front end. That's the stuff that we interact with. The stuff under the hood, so the stuff within SQL and those cubes, we have this pre-configured solution called Core, C-O-R-E, Core, and we have connectors that Core connects to. So Nav, D365, you know, Business Central, Epicor, a whole bunch of different connectors. We've got Salesforce and things like that. And all of those connectors load up to what we call Core. And Core is our centerpiece that has pre-built knowledge of general ledger, payroll, I think AR/AP, and a whole bunch of other things. Now that's what we call vanilla, like vanilla ice cream. Yeah, it tastes all right. Throw a bit of chocolate ice cream on top, or some flavor, and this is the configuring or customization, then it's going to be a lot more useful. So we use terms like, I think, segment 1, 2, 3, 4, which will get renamed to entity or cost center or department or sub account, things like that. You know, payroll gets configured pretty aggressively at all organizations, but we've got the foundations there. So so it's a pretty quick configuration these days. And the way we've crafted is, and this is important, and I've seen this done poorly with some of our competitors, is when we upgrade Core, any changes you've made come along with it. When we upgrade Columo, any of those configurations and changes come along with it. So you're never having to re-engineer stuff. I don't know if that's the best way to answer that, but generally, you know, maybe another way to put it, you know, it's around about 2 weeks worth of consulting hours, so about 80 hours-ish training to implement a consolidated reporting project, you know, maybe across multiple entities and multiple currencies.
Okay, thank you, Warwick. And a few other ones. How many companies rely on AI for their forecasting?
Not many. It's interesting. It's interesting. Companies and people, obviously, companies are created by and run by people. They go through a sort of a growth. Generally they start with reporting and budgeting and forecasting, then they move to continuous forecasting or rolling forecasts. And often they stop there. Many companies don't even go that far because it's just too hard because they're living in Excel. But those who break free of Excel and really need a finger on the pulse, and they're generally, historically, they're organizations that are in volatile industries like hospitality, where, you know, it is really difficult to predict what's going to happen. But they've got awesome revenue and costing models. So, they might, a hotel chain can put in an occupancy number for their hotels for the day or the week, and it'll automatically generate all the costs and revenues that are going to come out of that hotel, including the restaurants and the bars and things within that. So once you've got that, plugging in AI afterwards is pretty straightforward. But not a lot of people do it because they're not even at that modeling place. They're bashing and dying in Excel. Those that do move through that horizontal chart I showed are miles ahead of their competitors, and they're the organisations you see that IPO fast, and the revenues coming in. Profitability is fantastic because they're looking forwards all the time. So it's a subset of those companies. So I think like Gartner said, there was about 19% of enterprises, and that's enterprises. That's forgetting everyone else below.
Okay, thank you. And how long does it take to implement an AI project?
Yeah, look, anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, generally speaking. It can be longer. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. So an extreme example, and you may have heard about this, is companies like Target and Kroger and Walmart. They've been using data scientists and machine learning for a long time to draw people into their store, and what they're looking for is a change in habit. And machine learning can be used to see when habits are changing. So people might pop into Target to buy a couple of things, for instance. That data, maybe they use a Target credit card or their loyalty card, is then used to determine if there's a habit change or some uplift or some change in people's lives. And the only way to change people's habits is when there's a monumental change, moving city, changing job, having a baby. And there's this example where Target was sending flyers for baby diapers and things like that to a family that were sure that no one in the family was pregnant. It turns out the daughter was, and I think there may have been a legal case about it. It's pretty infamous, but it's true. If you want to learn more about that, projects, let me know. But projects like that, they're ongoing. They never cease because there's so much data that they're trying to wrangle. It's really hardcore stuff. The stuff we do, you're talking anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, and you're up and running.
Okay. And one last question. Can I forecast my cash flow with AI?
Sort of. It is a good question. So the answer is yes, and you want to get some forecasting around AR. That's a big one because that's cash, obviously. I know that the cash flows, it's the balance sheet, but you need the P&L to get to the balance sheet. So you need those drivers of the organisation and the business models, the calculations for the forecast to get there. Get mostly there, but they're still tweaking in cash flow because the machine doesn't know if you're going to acquire a company that the CEO happens to be looking at in the next couple of weeks or couple of months. So there's still an absolute element of human need to interact, but you can get 90% of the way there.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have for you today. If anybody has any further questions that you want to contact Warwick about, or your Innovia account manager, you're more than welcome to. So I just want to thank Warwick for presenting today.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Angie.
And if you're on our webinar, for those of you that are on, thank you. We appreciate you taking your time out and attending this. And if you're watching on demand, we thank you for joining us. And to let you know, we are having our annual customer conference coming up on May 21st. Due to COVID-19, we will be moving to a virtual conference. Contact your rep, or you can visit our conference page where we have all the details for our virtual conference. And that website is innovia.com/conferences. And this is a free event for you to attend virtually, and we would love to have you take part in it. So register now so you don't miss out on this great event. And we have a few more webinars coming soon. Tomorrow we have Erin from Jet Global presenting on Achieve Total Data Access and Future-Proof Your Reporting. And then next Tuesday, we have John Grant and Jenny Hollingsworth from Innovia Consulting continuing their webinar series on Manufacturing 101. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. And if you haven't heard already, we do have a podcast. It's called the Innovia Conversation, and we just want to encourage you to listen to the selection that Steve Waltz and Jeff Progolski have provided to us over the last year. And they do about 2 episodes a month, and you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out the selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. All right, well, we thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Warwick, for presenting, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone.